Jadzia Dax wants Major Kira to bring Captain Baudet to her place for dinner. Mirror Universe Bareil is a better thief than Worf gave him credit for, and the Intendant says that Major Kira is the next best thing to her. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton.
Hello.
My name is Ryan T. Husk. Today we're doing a review of Deep Space Nine, Season 6, Episode 8, Resurrection, written by Michael Taylor. And what do you know? Mr. Michael Taylor is joining us here today. Hello, Michael.
Hey, good to see you guys.
Great to see you. Thank you so much.
Good to see you.
For taking the time.
Definitely got to start with those glasses, man. Those are some fresh glasses.
You know what? There's a little story behind them. These are pandemic glasses. I saw a newspaper LA Times story on Mark Mothersbaugh, former leader of Devo, and he's just into specs. And so he designed his own. And I thought, those look really cool. So I just ordered them. But, you know, sight unseen, they came back, and I think they're made for like a somewhat bigger head than mine. But they freak people out, so I just wear them.
Devo, what a blast from the past.
Chrome. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, but I could change them if it's like, you know, affecting the camera or whatever.
No, it looks cool. I like it.
Cirroc is an eyeglass connoisseur himself. Sometimes he shows up wearing some Avery Brooks looking ones. I do want to also point out this was directed by Mr. LeVar Burton also. So that's always got to be a cool thing as a writer when there's a director that you may or may not enjoy. And this is November 17th, 1997. Everybody listening in or watching, where were you in the middle of November 24 years ago? This is going to be a fun one. But yeah, again, Michael, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Everybody at home, if you don't know who Michael Taylor is, he wrote 4 episodes on Deep Space Nine, a whole ton on Voyager. There are a couple others he wrote on Deep Space Nine of note that you may want to look into: The Visitor and In the Pale Moonlight. And right now, everybody that doesn't know is going like, what? Michael Taylor wrote 2 of the 5 best episodes ever in Deep Space Nine. A lot of people say that those are their number 1 and number 2.
Yeah,
I don't even know where to start with all that, because I kind of want to talk about those a little bit.
We can.
How does this whole process work? Is it just like you're pitching them and they're saying, you know what, can you write this episode and we'll just check it out when you're done? Is that kind of how it goes?
Well, there is a process for a freelancer pitching a show. And I was a freelancer for all 4 Deep Space Nine episodes that I did. I was living in New York at the time. I had been a reporter, but at this point I was a musician with a rock band. And
what did you play?
I played guitar and still do. But my band would sit around and watch The Simpsons after practice. And one day I just had an idea for a Simpsons show. So I wrote it, you know. It turned out to be more like a Simpsons movie. And I really didn't know what to do with it. But a friend of mine, a playwright who was living across the hall, came running up one night and said, you got to give me that script, because there's a guy downstairs at the bar who writes for Star Trek. And I got to show it to him. We lived upstairs from the bar, called The Edge. We actually lived over the Edge in the East Village in New York City. And that guy was Rene Echevarria, who lived across the street from us on East 3rd Street. And he took it, liked it, and showed it to his agent, who sort of shrugged his shoulders. I had previously sent it to the Simpsons folks, who turned out had enough Simpsons scripts of their own. They didn't really need mine. But I also sent it to a young agent who was then at an agency called Triad, who was also very nice, Ari Emanuel. And he also said, good luck. But Rene said he should try pitching ideas to Star Trek, because they buy them. He was then a freelancer shortly to go on staff at The Next Generation. So I started pitching stories, and he would poo-poo them. Then I had a story that was so good, I said, I'm not even going to tell him and let him, harsh my buzz. So I did a bunch of research and wrote a whole story, a Next Generation script about Data and his sort of evil brother, Only in the end, it turns out the evil brother never was there, and it was Data who had a kind of psychic break over the deep-seated fear of how evil he might become if he actually had emotions. And that script got read by someone, and it got me the privilege, didn't get produced, of pitching to the show, which I did on the phone. And my first pitch session was with Ron Moore. And I kind of thought it'll be, this will be a give and take. We'll have a conversation. I had written out all my stuff by hand. And Ron just sort of sat back and said, all right, what have you got? And I was trying to read off my notes and whatever. And, it didn't go great. And I thought, well, that's it. I flubbed my one opportunity to maybe sell a show to one of my favorite shows. But then they called up and said, like a month later, so you want to do it again? And I said, okay, sure. I did not realize that there was a revolving door of writers coming into pitch again and again. And I realized that when I was receiving those pitches on Voyager. But at the time, it was like, okay, thank God I got a second chance. And this time, like a writer, I scripted the whole thing. It sounded like I was delivering it naturally, but I wrote every damn word down. And Renee was interested in 4 of the things I pitched. And this one in particular, The Visitor, was the one that really got his attention. So I could go into the genesis of that idea, but what it ended up, then I got a chance to write a story document. And normally it would stop there. It's like kind of a rough outline of the pitch. But Ron Moore dug out my old script, which had been read by some reader, read it and said, oh, this is really good. We'll let him write a script. So that became my first produced episode of television. And I will say up front here that I wrote, created the idea, wrote the story and the first draft. But Renee Echevarria came on board and did a pass on it, which made it at least 2 to 3 times as good. So they were very kind to freelancers in the sense of, you do a good job, it's your idea, your name stays on it. But in that case, and later with my last episode for Deep Space Nine, In the Pale Moonlight, was a similar kind of situation. I wrote a version.
Before we get into the Pale Moonlight, I just want to finish with The Visitor because,
I
mean, what a great story. And, it's been an episode that I've talked about pretty much endlessly.
Yeah.
As I reflect on the work we did on DS9, that is pretty much, one of, if not the best in as far as my participation is concerned. So I want to thank you for writing The Visitor, coming up with the idea. And I just want to get a little bit into the genesis of what that idea was, because I don't ever really recall seeing something that's written in such a way where a parent watches their child kind of age and die in front of them. I thought that's an original idea, and I just wanted to kind of get into where that comes from for you.
Well, it came to that most schmaltzy sort of inspiration. I was sitting around, I think, listening to this Harry Chapin song, Cats in the Cradle.
Yes.
I remember that. It's like, a distant father who's barely there for his son. And then his son, grows up and, is barely there for his dad. And, and the line, my son grew up just like me, and I was getting kind of teary because my parents were divorced. My dad was in Florida and we lived in New York. And I said, oh, man, that really hits home. And then I said, wait a second, your relationship with your father is nothing like these guys. Nonetheless, it was far better. We talked all the time. But it got me thinking of how a relationship, a parent or a child as they grow up, or parents sometimes, think of how quickly their kids grow up, almost like a series of snapshots. And I thought, what if those snapshots were all you had?
Wow.
And then I thought, well, Star Trek is magic. How might that happen? And and then we had whatever, Subspace Pocket, trapped in a subspace pocket, see of the wormhole. So Deep Space Nine gave me that kind of gag, an opportunity, basically just a reason to tell that story. And then the other aspect of it was the reclusive writer. I remember J.D. Salinger did very few interviews. And one of the only interviews he did was with a high school student who somehow found their way to his door and got him to sit down and do an interview. And I thought, oh, so interesting. If a young person, comes out of the night, knocks on a famous writer's door, and that writer is Jake Sisko, only, what the hell, he's old. And then the idea that he's going to tell the story only now because it's in a way going to be his last will and testament, because he's planning to kill himself, to bring his dad back. So that's how that came together.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
and everybody at home that loves that Harry Chapin song, but they're thinking, what about Ugly Kid Joe? He covered it, and everybody knows it's not as good as the original. But that's so cool. And one thing, Cirroc, I know you want to say something. I just want to say real quick that that's got to be so freeing as a writer if you are writing for a show like Star Trek, where almost anything you can think about, including bringing somebody back from the dead, whatever you want, you're like, hey, we could probably do it, even if it's on a holodeck, if it's visiting wormhole aliens, maybe Q comes and snaps his thing. You can literally have this playground to where any story is possible, and it's just got to be so freeing and exciting.
Well, I mean, that was the allure of the Star Trek from the beginning, and certainly as a writer on it, it was the freedom to tell stories that were essentially allegories. I mean, this was, before the whole sort of rise of serialized television. Star Trek was very episodic. Characters did grow; they had arcs. And Voyager certainly was on a mission that had a longer arc, and the same was built into Deep Space Nine. And yet, you still were afforded the opportunity to tell one-off stories that were just fun or provocative, made you think or feel, and that was what was great about it. And it was nominally a science fiction show, but within that genre, it could be a doctor show one week, or a lawyer show, or a detective show, or a spy show. All these things were possible. So that was my introduction to science fiction and genre writing, and it stayed with me. It was, any idea you could think of, you could find a way to tell. So it was a incredible.
When you were telling the story just now about the song and the relationship between the father and son, you were starting to actually get emotional slightly, and I felt your voice cracking. And the interesting thing is that you were able to capture that same emotion in the episode, because as I watched The Visitor, I get that same emotion that you were just about to zone off into. And
even more so.
That's the brilliance. Yeah, and that's the brilliance of how you were able to take that thought and turn it into this piece of art, which we all appreciate. The other thing I wanted to say really quickly is how much I love Star Trek, in general, the idea of a story telling a story about itself. I believe that in Far Beyond the Stars kind of did an example of that as well. The story was actually talking about itself in some type of way. And I felt like that The Visitor is just an awesome way in which that was, accomplished. And really quickly, love the reference to the J.D. Salinger that you made, because that's somebody who I was really influenced by growing up and reading Catcher in the Rye. I felt like I identified with that character in some type of way. So all great points that you made. But
can I just pause real quick for a second? Because Cirroc, you made a point, and I don't want it to go unnoticed or just kind of glossed over. But that's a phenomenal thing, to take an emotional feeling that you get from a song and transfer, more so than the story. It feels like what Cirroc is saying, like you transferred that emotion over to an episode of television. I'd never really seen or thought of that before, and that's a beautiful. It's a beautiful thing, and I just want to you kind of, Cirroc, stopped me in my tracks. I was like, wow, I just kind of went off on that. But anyway, please continue. I just wanted to make sure that was really hit hard.
Well, I mean, another element of that, I mean, and this is the most romantic and emotional element in almost any story. It's almost the definition of the novel. It's the passage of time. Mm-hmm. Time is, it's mortality, which we all face in different ways at different stages of our lives, and certainly family is, plays into that whole theme as well. One of my favorite episodes of The Next Generation was The Inner Light, in which Captain Picard is marooned on a planet in his mind and lives an entire life. And then, comes out of it and is staring at a little flute that he, an actual artifact from that imagined life. And that is incredibly moving. Again, that sense of aging, of confronting mortality, of having kids and seeing them grow up. Those are just big elements that, can't fail but to, hook you with a big emotional wallop. But yeah.
Were you, when they were filming that? I mean, David Livingston was, I believe he was the director of that episode. Yeah, David Livingston directed that. Were you able to be on the set when they were doing that episode?
No, it was definitely not. Okay. But that episode did get nominated for a Hugo Award. And I did get to go to LA for that. And I met one of my future best friends there, another science fiction writer. And Ira Bear met me there. And I think it was like at a Radisson hotel or something. So I had my little possible winner speech prepared. And you get at a certain point, you're in the audience, and all of a sudden the paper sign that says Hugo Award starts peeling off the lectern, and underneath it says Radisson Hotels. This ain't the Oscars. Nonetheless, all those same emotions. And in the end, an episode of Babylon 5 won instead. A piece of shit. But I got to spend the evening in the so-called Losers Lounge with all the cool writers of both short stories and novels and television, commiserating and getting drunk. And it was a community of science fiction folks, and it was really cool. And I told Ira about the speech I'd prepared, and he said, "Hey, listen," he said, "thank God you didn't have to give it."
Oh, that's Ira, all right. What's funny, though? Right. I'm picturing all the people in the quote Losers Lounge. Like, if you win, you're like, the Hugo Awards, beautiful, amazing, so good. But then if you don't win, you're like, the sticker was peeling. This place sucks. Let's go get a beer.
I'm sure it would have been a totally different experience had I won. And
the lights were shimmering. The chandelier was glistening.
Until they gonged me off the stage, or with
the hook, the old hook at the Apollo, right?
But before we got started, I
want to thank one more person.
But before we got started, you did tell us a little bit, and about In the Pale Moonlight, which is another blockbuster, legendary episode that you had your hand in. And I just wanted to say, because I remember watching this episode saying, God, I love the way Sisko is talking to the computer and having this moment of therapy. Tell me a little bit about that episode and your feelings for that.
All right. Well, I love that episode, but it's not the episode I wrote. It's the episode ultimately Ron Moore wrote. But to me, it epitomized everything, the best of Deep Space Nine and its darkest. Even watching it, I think I was in a hotel somewhere watching it on TV. It looked dark. I don't know if it was the lighting design or something, but it looked like, it had that vibe of a John le Carré story or something. But this was the last couple things I did, I think, including Resurrection, did not start from original ideas. My second one, Things Past? Yeah, that
Things
was
Past.
sort of an original idea. Like, could Odo form a great link just with his close buddies, and what would happen then? But this one, they brought me in and had an idea for a spy show. And I think I had the idea of a historical incident known as the Zimmerman telegram. And that's where, basically false evidence was created to bring over an enemy onto our side, something like that. And so that was the genesis of that. And I remember we just called it the Ink because it was basically a MacGuffin in the break. But to me, it was really interesting having started as a young reporter, having, started Jake, I guess, on his path to becoming a writer in The Visitor. If it wasn't, I think your character already had shown his inclination to be a writer. But here that he could be a kind of reporter who latches onto this story that is much bigger than he realizes was really attractive to me. So that's what I pitched, and that's what they signed off on, and that's what I wrote. And I think it was, it was great, and it was another great episode for Jake Sisko. However, I think after that, the writers got around and said, this is just my theory. Ron would have to tell you what happened, but this is too big. This has to be on the captain's, head. This is something he's got to grapple with, and he's got to do. And then Ron went on and wrote what I think is one of the best episodes of Deep Space Nine, among the many great episodes that the staff did. And I also love the wonderful framing of the captain's log. And at the end, he says, I can live with it. I'll have to live with it. I can live with it. And he looks at the camera and he says, erase log. And it just goes black, which is way before Tony, for Tony Soprano's screen went black. So preempting David Chase. Yes, Michael, erasing the record.
Real quick, we only have a couple minutes left before our break, and we're definitely going to talk about Resurrection on the other side of the break. But before we flip over, I always get really curious when we talk to writers that threw out pitches and stuff. And we know some writers pitched one thing and got one thing picked up. Others got 4 things picked up, but they pitched 50. Can you tell us one or two of your favorite pitch ideas that did not get picked up, or something that you thought was interesting? Because to us and the fans, we always say it feels like we just get an extra episode of Star Trek when we hear your idea.
I had so many. God, I'd have to go back in my files to if I still exist, to see something I pitched that didn't, that I wished I had sold. I was just happy that I sold the ones that I did, and I think they were among my best pitches. So I can't offer any elucidation there. Perhaps during the break I can go look something up. But
just a little bit piggyback to that question. The Visitor did come in the 4th season. So were you already were you 3 seasons current watching the episodes, and you had known where we're at, or were there?
Yes. Well, when I set out to try to sell a pitch to the next generation, when Renee suggested I try doing that, I hadn't really watched the show. I'd watched the original when I was younger, but so I made a study of it. I watched it episode by episode. I read all the guides and Bibles that folks like Mark Altman then were writing, analyzing the where you heard snippets of the writer's process, which gave me an insight into how they came up with ideas and how they progressed toward production. So I made the same study of Deep Space Nine, but along the way, watching The Next Generation, I said, oh, this is great. I came to, quickly love the show. And also the very measured theatrical pace of it and the kind of philosophical outlook of it. It really hooked me. But yes, I made I was watching as a fan, but also as someone saying, this is how I'm going to make my bones as a writer. And so I watched Deep Space Nine. And the fourth season for me was, a number of these shows, it's interesting. The Next Generation, I don't think was as great as it became in the first two seasons.
Right.
But these shows all got at least 7 seasons, and they all found their stride. And to me, I think fourth season was a big turn for Deep Space Nine. This is as a fan, because you added the Defiant to the mix. I believe that was the beginning of the fourth season. Because you had a space station and Worf. You had a space station. It was a wonderful environment, but you added a starship so you could go places, because that was, going boldly was the essence of Star Trek. And now you could boldly go, if only to the wormhole, but anywhere, and it just really came together. And yes, Worf joined. So I was very excited to be part of getting my start in that fourth season of the show.
Mm-hmm. So let's take a quick break right here. And I know, yes, the fans are screaming in my ear right now, virtually, of course. And Sisko shaved his head and grew a goatee. Yes, we know. That was also.
He went back. He accessed his inner hawk.
Yes.
We always should.
Yeah. All right. So we'll take a quick break. Everybody at home, stick around. Actually, you know what? Real quick as well. Michael Taylor is working on a show called Pantheon. It's going to be coming out next year on AMC. It's animated. Stay tuned for that. Check it out. If there's more to be said, just say it on the other side of the break. But it looks like maybe there is more to be said. So we'll be right back on The Seventh Rule. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to The Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton.
Hello.
Michael Taylor is joining us and regaling us with some of the coolest stories. I feel like this is almost like a fireside chat. Like he's like, gather around, everybody. I'm about to bring you back to 1997. It was a simpler time, but we were moving mountains. We're going to do a very quick thing, the trivioids. Here they come. Jadzia Dax wants Major Kira to bring Captain Baudet to her place for dinner. Dr. Trag Talk has a very opaque cranium. I don't remember if I'm pronouncing that name right.
Transparent cranium. That was the problem.
No, Baudet had the transparent one, but Trag Talk had the opaque cranium. Those two were wrestling about that. Mirror Universe Baral.
Another issue was the middle eye was what threw Kira off.
Exactly, yeah. Mirror Universe Baral wants to meet his alter ego. The Bajorans take a look at the Orb of Prophecy and Change. Mirror Universe Baral admits to exaggerating his story, but then shows the opposite. Baral is a better thief than Worf gave him credit for. Vedic Antos Baral didn't eat in bed. Bashir calls privacy. Mirror Universe Kira says that Major Kira is the next best thing to her. The Intendant wants Baral to pass a smooch from her to Major Kira. And Quark wants to sell tickets to look at Baral. All right. Back to the fun, everybody. Yeah, there are a lot of fun little things in there. But before we get to any more of that, do you want to tell us a little bit about the show Pantheon that's coming out soon?
Oh, okay. This is very cool. I mean, I've always been a fan of anime and animation in general, but this is a science fiction show in the anime style, being drawn here in LA and out in South Korea, and is created by Craig Silverstein, who also created the show Turn Washington Spies that I worked on in a historical spy thriller. And it's just very cool. It was also a perfect show to do during the pandemic because we had no real sets.
Right.
And we had an incredible cast, Paul Dano, William Hurt, I think John Cho, because these guys could, between whatever movie projects they were doing, they could do their recordings at their kitchen table. We sent them all the equipment they need, like the kind of stuff we have back here for my wife's voiceover roles. And it was just really interesting. And of course, you have incredible latitude and freedom and animation. You could build any set, create any environment.
Right.
It could be as expressive, as surreal as you want. And the notion of the show, or the concept of the show, premise, I guess, really lends itself to that. And that is that a technology has been developed that allows people to upload themselves to the cloud. And in the process, they die. Their physical self dies. So it is something that is co-opted by an evil corporation, and then ultimately various state governments that use it to create super hackers, which then rain havoc down on the world and cause all sorts of mayhem. But it's ultimately a kind of family story with some teenage heroes who are trying to put the brakes on all this. It's just and so it's just a really interesting concept, and half of it takes place in virtual space. Though arguably the whole show takes place in a virtual space as an animated show, but it just allows you a lot of latitude.
Wow, so that sounds really cool. And that's gonna be on AMC.
AMC, right.
I've seen that, by the way. I've seen the actual live action true story of that same concept, which is called the metaverse. You upload yourself, and
well, I mean, I guess there are different versions of the metaverse. Neil Stephenson, the sci-fi novelist, wrote, I think, the first version of it where he coined the term in a novel called Snow Crash, which is great.
Snow Crash.
He was part of the cyberpunk kind of movement, spearheaded by another favorite writer of mine named William Gibson, all of whose books are just fascinating, great reads, and Bruce Sterling and Neil Stephenson. And so he coined the term metaverse, and in that version, it was more like people were not dead. They just, interacted in a Sims-like environment that was very advanced, using suits, all sorts of haptic stuff, and VR goggles. And that, I think, is what Zuckerberg is talking about with Facebook. And what people are already doing with various companies, I guess online, you can, other than Zoom, you can have a little avatar and meet in, let's say, a virtual writer's room. I'm not sure what the value of that is yet, but the more immersive it becomes, the more interesting, it will become.
Mm-hmm. Now, Michael, you know what that reminds me of? You were mentioning before we were recording about how interested you were in the mirror universe and working on this episode in the mirror universe, because that's kind of like a second life. Usually they go in a different direction than, it's almost like the prime universe is their second life, but it seems like it was quite the playground to be able to work with the mirror universe. Was that kind of where the idea came from, was wanting to bring the mirror universe to them? Or
I think this was an idea I was kind of handed. It was Ira Bear's idea. I think it was just initially that the intendant would come back and Bareil would come back. And as to what would happen when they came back, that was to be worked out. Yes, the mirror universe to me is, kind of fascinating. In fact, more interesting to me than I think how the episode came out, but it's it's still dealing with something very primal and basic. The idea of a loved one you lost. What if they returned, but they were different, and you sort of project all the qualities you loved about the original person onto them, this new person, but ultimately they're not the same person. We could talk more about the episode and where it was initially headed, and how it ended up where it did, if we want. But to me, it's like almost, I'm just interested also in just the whole concept of the mirror universe, which began with the classic next TNG episode, not TNG, sorry, the classic episode.
Series,
Yes, original series. What's the abbreviation for that? The classic Trek, as opposed to TNG.
Now I'm thinking of Enterprise. It was everybody's yelling at it right now. It's like in the mirror darkly, or what was it called?
Oh no, the episode was called Mirror Mirror.
Mirror, right.
But I'm just trying to think of the acronym that we used to refer to those original episodes.
TOS.
TOS. All right. The original stories. Is that what it is?
Series, the original series.
Yeah.
Or as what's her name says on Lower Decks, she calls it those old scientists or something like that. Those old stories. I think maybe that's what it was. Anyway, in Lower Decks, but please continue.
But it's sort of an unusual, from a science point of view, it's like, how would you have an alternate universe where every character is still alive, but different, and evil, in some way, or at least ruthless. In that original show, the Spock character was most interesting because, as a creature of logic or dedicated to logic, it sort of mitigates certain ruthless qualities or certain moral or issues as terms of what is logical, and pure aggression is probably not always logical. But I sort of thought about it. It's like, if there is some underpinning to this, it seems like it's like Freudian or Jungian. Jung spoke of the shadow, part of ourselves, which is basically the unconscious, every part of ourselves that we don't understand or we don't have real conscious access to, where we can indulge. The shadow naturally seems to connote something darker. But to me, that's just really interesting that this universe was invented and, everyone survives. Well, no, in this case, Bareil died in our version. And then the other Bareil survived. You would think that would throw off their timelines pretty severely.
Yes.
And if, whatever right there, but we don't worry about that shit. Because with Star Trek, we're interested in bigger things, which is the allegorical component and the emotional components of finding a different version of yourself and confronting that version. And basically it's confronting your own darker side, your own shadow, your own impulses. And that's, I guess, ultimately, in a way, what happens in Resurrection is that Kira, finds herself not being able to go home in a way to that relationship. But it did
that was the
trial was more fun and probably better in the sack. That was my impression anyway.
I think that's Cirroc's impression too, right?
That's what I was about to say, actually. So, no, as I was watching the episode, my first instinct was, oh, this is her getting back at Odo for sleeping with the founder in a couple episodes before this. So she gets her get back.
Right,
she
that's
gets
funny.
to do her thing. So that was my first thought. But I was also a little bit wanting to go a little bit deeper. You started to hint on it and scratch on it in this episode. But I wanted a little bit more background. And that was when Bareil was starting to look at the Bajoran faith and start having questions like, oh, not knowing what the prophets were and not knowing. And I was saying, well, how is he Bajoran and not know what the Bajorans do? Isn't that part of what, their culture?
Yes, there are the mirror universe sometimes opens some big holes. It's like they don't really have faith over there, or they don't have orbs. Yeah. Now, I went back to the original breaks for this, which I wrote. And it was quite different in the sense that, I think there are some elements that were really interesting. That he, in fact, brought an orb over called the Orb of Sorrow. Well, at least that's what we were calling it. And his, idea is that he is religious and and he seduces Kira, and he's going to then go down to Bajor and put the orb on a pedestal with the other orbs. And then it turns out this orb is like the One Ring orb, the orb to rule all other orbs. And it will make him a prophet. It will make him a god. And so his goal is like messianic. It's, he wants to be a prophet, and all hell breaks loose. And we actually get in and we start, and Kira has an orb vision, and we see what it is. It's, people grasping at her, scary ways, and she realizes ultimately these are all the people who will be destroyed if this comes to pass, if Bareil gets his wish. And I think, and in the episode that aired, Bareil has an orb experience and he wants to talk about it, and she tells him no, it's private. And it's like, to me, it's like, what? It's like, this is where the drama is. What the fuck did he say? But we had all this stuff going on, and I've got to imagine, you'd have to ask Ira what his decision was, but it was presumably to focus just on the emotional core of this relationship. But ultimately, I think it became one of the least liked episodes. In which case, I'm glad to fall on that grenade.
Who would have liked?
He wrote The Visitor, but he also wrote Resurrection.
Highs and lows, man. Who would have loved the Orb of Sorrow? Worf. He would have been like, "It is glorious." He would have been like, "Orb of Sorrow, I'm all in. Here we go. Let's." But one of the hardest thing, and I'm always lamenting this in any series, especially Star Trek series, because that's pretty much all I watch besides sports. But the hardest thing to do is convincing the audience that two people fell in love in 3 scenes. Or, in a full episode, we have the entire arc of an entire relationship, and it's just so hard to make it believable. Whereas you got a leg up in this case to make it believable, which is, for Major Kira, it's not a blank slate. She didn't just, like in Meridian, it was so hard for us to believe in the second or third scene that Dax had already fallen in love with some douchey guy or whatever. But in this, it works because Kira already has feelings for Bareil. She recognizes the person that she loved so strongly. And, on Bareil's side, obviously he's in love with her counterpart. So it definitely seems like it made your job a lot easier, and you could just get to the story more easily rather than trying to convince us this is how they fell in love. Did you feel that kind of freedom or that kind of leg up?
I guess so. honestly, I don't remember.
It was only 24 years ago.
It's a while ago. It wasn't, as important to me as my first episode, The Visitor, or my second, Things Past. Or in Pale Moonlight, which I just plain loved and was glad to be, and been involved with. So when you guys initially said, I'm going to do this episode Resurrection, I went, oh, okay, let's look that one up. And it said, oh shit, you wrote it, which is not, I have friends who joke, it's happened before. I forget, episodes that I wrote because I did a lot of them, and it's also a while ago. So to me, I don't, I'm just looking at it and I don't, exactly get it. And I think the actress, Nana Visitor, right? She didn't quite understand why, or didn't think she would let her guard down that quickly with this guy.
Interesting.
But maybe it factored in. I don't know, because later, one of my first episodes of Voyager was called Counterpoint. And it dealt with a kind of similar scenario. Janeway kind of falling for a kind of Gestapo-like but charismatic guy. She's meanwhile trying to protect a bunch of Anne Frank-like people who are surviving in the transporter buffer. and she has a whole romance, and you see the attraction, and yet ultimately, the guy turns out to be no good. In Janeway's case, and I guess in Resurrection as well, she's onto him, and with Kira, she sort of has to be told by Quark to look out for this guy,
right?
And it's like, all right, But in Janeway's case, was the pathos of that was that she could never let her guard down completely. That's what it meant to be the captain. In the end, the guy turns out to be bad, but she was prepared for it. He's going to capture these people, but she's already created a diversion. He thinks he's caught them, but no, they're already off through some other wormhole. And that's the sad, you get that, the sad responsibility of being a captain is that you can never trust that much. And your emotions always play second fiddle toward your responsibility for your ship and your crew. But it was a similar concept. So maybe to some degree, it informed that episode.
It definitely makes it more palatable. And by the way, I don't think you should be too hard on yourself for this episode, because what we found is that 25 years later, episodes sit differently than they did. And so what some episodes that people didn't necessarily like as much, back in the 90s or even 10 years ago, upon rewatching, they're a lot. I mean, I know for me, it's happened so many times where we're watching an episode and I'm like, oh yeah, I don't really remember liking this one too much, for example. And then I like watching, I'm like, actually, I like this very much. This is really good. And I think a lot of it has to do with the placement. This was like the 8th episode in the 6th season, right? And we had this long, draining, difficult, dark 6-episode arc. And we need a break that's kind of like business back as usual. Business, everybody's kind of coming back. Everybody's kind of, and Kira she deserves a break. She just dealt with an occupation for however many months. Yeah. And so a lot of it is just, upon watching it with fresh eyes, you can appreciate things a lot more. I know for myself, all the Bajoran stuff is much more enjoyable now than it was upon first watch.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. I'm watching it out of sequence on its own when I watched it the other night. And yes, in terms of the tempo of the show, because Deep Space Nine was serialized, it was a way ahead of its time for television. It was a pointer to where television would go, while still doing wonderful one-off fun episodes. But there was a really powerful arc that having a sort of a rest after a powerful sequence of episodes like that is, makes a lot of sense. That said, I watched it on its own and thought, oh shit, this is kind of lame. But that's just fucking me, and my name's on it, so I get to say that. But it's there's a similar episode or tonally in The Next Generation. I think it was after the Best of Both Worlds two-parter, the cliffhanger. Heavy shit. And then afterwards, Picard goes home. And we meet his brother, and we see the vineyard for the first time. And I forget.
And they're wrestling in the mud, all silly.
Yeah, I forget what that episode was called, but it was wonderful. It was wonderful. It was a break from all that action, but it was just deep and personal and moving. Yeah.
I wouldn't be too hard on yourself. I'm gonna agree with you that this is not my favorite episode, but
Cirroc.
It just was a little bit slow. And actually, if it was the way that you just said it was supposed to be when you originally pitched the idea, I would have been I wanted to see the story you just told me about the evil orb and this whole trying to get this power.
Much more Indiana Jones. It was, whatever.
Great.
The Ark of the Covenant and all that kind of shit. But yeah.
It would have been great. I think they missed the opportunity to tell that story, and they kind of went with this one for whatever reason. But needless to say, you're working with other input and other factors. It's not just, you're not a one-man show who just gets to put on whatever you want to put on. So you have to consult. And But the experience that you gain from just the overall experience from DS9 and writing led to eventually you becoming one of the staff writers on Voyager, though, right? I mean, so you gained,
It led to my career. 25 years later, here I am, and it's thanks to, those weird circumstances and that first Simpsons script and Renee being a friend of my friend at a bar. And then it became Deep Space Nine, and then Voyager just became an incredible education, an opportunity as a budding writer. And Ira Bear is one of the most remarkable showrunners I've worked with, and I've worked with a lot of them. And just so into the show. I remember on one of my episodes, maybe it was the second one, Things Past or something. We had a break where I wasn't sure if we were going to get there. And I was thinking, oh my God, am I going to go home without a show? But we're working our way toward it. And then he came in the next morning and says, I don't know about the rest of you guys, but or probably I'm sure the rest of you guys felt the same way, but I was driving home last night and somebody had to pull off the highway and, park on the median, whatever. I said, when did Odo know? What did Odo know and when did he know it? Or something like that. And I thought, no, I just went back to my hotel and got some room service and cried about my probably stillborn fucking career. And I actually think Renee and Ron and everyone else just went out to dinner and said, fuck it, we'll figure it out in the morning. But Ira pulled off the road because he was the captain and that was his responsibility. And that's how deeply he thought about that show. And ultimately the dynamic of Resurrection, the rest of that stuff I talked about, Orbs of Sorrow and, I want to be a prophet. It's a way also window dressing, action, run and jump stuff around the central theme of that relationship, which is still the core of that show.
So. Right.
We've only got a few minutes left, actually. But I noticed last night when I was looking over the 4 Deep Space Nine episodes that you wrote, and sadly, this isn't a Voyager thing. Otherwise, I want to hear way more about this Anne Frank allegory here. I hadn't thought of that, and that's really interesting. And I want to know more about that. What you mentioned with the
that was episode. A pitch. That was a pitch by a freelancer, like I was not that long before a freelancer, about people hiding in a buffer, transport buffer. And I went out to dinner with the staff and Brandon Braga. And I was thinking, is this a show? Is this a good show? And Brandon, I think, or he wasn't even pitched as Anne Frank. Brandon just said, yeah, Anne Frank in the attic. Done.
He's like, I got it.
Yeah, there's another showrunner just knew what his show was and boom.
So what I wanted to, what I realized, what I wanted to point out very quickly was all 4 of the Deep Space Nine episodes that you wrote were like one character's emotional journey. And I realized that most, episodes are something like that, but very clearly there's a very clear emotional journey for one character in each of these, to where they can say, if somebody says, oh, what's that episode about? And they say, it's this person. And there's a beginning, middle, and end to where that character just has like this up, 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 and then the down, or a down, 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 and then an up. And I wonder if that's, kind of your writing style, to where you just want to think of a person and like capture a moment in our lives where, something was really great and then it dropped, or something was really bad and then it came up, or something like that.
That's really interesting. I hadn't thought about that with those episodes, and now I would probably examine subsequent episodes for other shows and that. But I guess, and I'm not sure if that wasn't true of Deep Space Nine in general, Cirroc. I mean, you would better to comment on that you would focus on a, certain character, give them, that would be, their story would be predominant. I'm thinking of even fun episodes like, was it Armand Bashir? Where you were focused on a certain character. And In my case, I guess it's possible because at various times certain characters have appealed to me or I've connected with. I remember on Voyager, I wrote a story, was called, I think, Someone to Watch Over Me. It was all about Seven of Nine because she was one of these classic characters. And what does she start to date? You know, and my original Next Generation spec, and gosh, I'm forgetting what that was, but it was about Data because I was so intrigued by Data, another classic Star Trek character, someone, an android who wants to become human, which is a classic theme. What is humanity? How do I embrace it? And I also love the idea that he had, in a way, a mirror universe doppelganger. It was not a mirror universe. It was just kind of a bad robot version of him. And it got me thinking, though, you know, would that character worry deeply, you know, in his that what happened if I do get emotions? Something I want, but I'm also in a way subconsciously afraid of it.
Right.
But I have a mental break and become this other character.
They're dangerous.
I researched that with a shrink, actually, who was also, fortunately, a computer scientist and a huge Star Trek fan. And he said, you know, actually, an AI, a neural net can have a kind of error that is similar to a psychosis in a human brain. I think it was called a data sink or something. You know, quite appropriately a data sink, or something like that. So anyway, but yes, I have been drawn to particular characters and just trying to understand them better. So that is something that's interesting to me. I did a Battlestar movie, a TV movie that aired briefly theatrically called Razor.
Right.
It was also about one character story, but not a regular character or even an existing character in the show up until that time. Very much that person's journey from dealing with an atrocity, a wartime atrocity that they had committed. So it's possible that my way of thinking or approaching stories is, you know, through the lens of a single character or fewer characters. Blood and Chrome, another Battlestar spinoff prequel I did, was sort of the idea of young Adama. You know, who was that character like?
Caprica?
That was Blood and Chrome.
Oh, right. Blood and Chrome. Right.
So that was young Adama was sort of the focus of that. So I think, you know, you may be onto something there. Or maybe my little mind can only really get into one character at a time. I don't know.
Probably not.
I'm not into team sports, so maybe there's something I only gravitate towards solo sports, so maybe that's, you know,
golf, tennis,
golf. Yeah,
not golf in my case, but yeah.
Well, Cirroc, we've got to run to our free for all. Any final thoughts before we go?
No, actually, I just want to say it's been a pleasure, Michael, talking with you.
All right.
Huge.
Likewise.
Definitely.
A lot of fun.
You know,
you guys are, you know, carrying the torch, keeping the flame alive. These shows stand on their own, but it is, you know, they all made a big impression on us as fans, as folks who acted in them, wrote them. It's just, you know, it's sort of a special time, and you know, to be part of something that still continues to this day and continues to grow. I think it's the best definition or one of the best examples of a franchise and how much it could embrace and how many different stories it could tell and how many generations of fans it can entrance. So,
yeah. I mean, you know, we talked to Mark Zicree and Jack Trevino and
Ethan Kalk,
now yourself, Ethan Kalk, and the amount of impact that you guys had left behind with the work you did is just, I just wanted to let you know how grateful we are that you were able to tell these stories in the way that you did, because it resonates with so many people who can find those kind of emotional connections with these stories and find ways to work them out in their own way. So The Visitor, to me is a prime example of how people were reminded of their own loved ones in their life, and how they either cherished them while they were here or remembered the memories in a special way because of The Visitor. So just the emotions that you were able to bring, and to me, the art that you were able to leave behind will always be treasured. I want to thank you for for me having the opportunity to work along and be a part of telling these stories. But yeah, man, you're awesome, and you've made your mark in the Star Trek world,
and in people's hearts, and
in people's hearts permanently. So thank you, Michael.
Well, thank you guys. It's been a great. Thanks for having me aboard. Look forward
we'll be watching out for Pantheon.
Yeah,
we'll be watching.
I should hopefully be early next year. I haven't heard a date yet, but I would hope by this spring.
We'll check it out.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right,
thanks, guys.
Last thing to say, very special thanks to Carmen, aka Skillet, TJ Jackson-Bey, out in Missouri, of course, Bill Victor Arucan, Yvette Blackmon, Tom, Homer Freezy out somewhere in New Yeezy, Eve England out in Wales, Dr. Anne-Marie Segal, Titus Mohler, Tim Baum, John Mann, Darlena Marie Rex A. Wood, Dr. Mohamed Noor, Joe Balsarotti, Tierney C. Dieckmann, and of course, very special thanks to Dr. Susan V. Gruner. Man, thanks so much, Michael. This has been awesome. Really appreciate it. Must be amazing to know that you touched so many lives all the way back as a beginning writer. It's really cool. And we hope to see you back again sometime soon.
All right. Okay. Bring me back for the Pale Moonlight with Ron. That'll be fun.
It's coming soon. Everybody at home, stick around. We've got the free-for-all next. And always remember the 7th rule.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the free-for-all for the 7th rule with our super hosts, Ryan T. Husk and Cirroc. And Cirroc Lofton, aka Jake Sisko.
Hello.
Our other guests today include Dr. Susan V. Gruner. We got Tierney Dieckmann. We have Eve England out in Wales. We have to put that part in.
Yep.
We have the amazing Melissa Longo. We have Homer Freezy out in New Yeezy, also known as Homer Frizzell. And of course, Guldu Scott Jensen. And I'm Mohamed Noor. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Excellent.
Nice.
Excellent. All right. So let's have some fun. Man, Michael Taylor also wrote for Battlestar Galactica. I wish we could have talked to him about that.
We didn't get into that. Yeah.
But look, there's an elephant in the room. Before we started recording, you guys, everybody said hello. We had our fun and all that. But there are a couple people that were very quiet. So we're going to start with them. Melissa Longo, do you have any thoughts on this episode or life in general?
I have a few thoughts on this episode. Yes, it's not the best episode, but I don't think it's the worst episode, as some have vehemently said.
On the internet.
There's some good moments in this episode, and that's, I think, and I am biased because Kira is my favorite, but I think that's because of Nana, and she's fantastic in doing her best work with what she's given. So yeah, there were some stinky moments in this episode. I agree, and it's not a favorite. I agree, but yeah, I don't think it's in the toilet terrible, trashy bad.
I liked it. Oh well, I liked it, but Homer made a really good point. He put it in the chat, our little personal chat here. It didn't even hit me. There was no B plot, right, Homer?
Right.
It was nonstop bad A plot.
No B plot.
I could have used a B plot.
What would have been a good B plot?
Jake. There was no Nog. Anything. Someone trying to smuggle something on board. Some mission Worf has on the Defiant. I mean, anything. I was someone learning chess. Even that would have been fine. Better. I just needed some relief. I didn't get it.
I think it's the meanest that Homer's ever been. Yeah.
I love that. Someone learning chess. That's hilarious.
All right. Yeah. I think what you guys need is a shot of Mohamed positivity here. I can't be the only one that enjoyed this episode.
I mean, it was, as Melissa said, it was not an especially good episode. I actually texted Anne-Marie partway through it saying, oh my God, what is with this episode? But I will say, and I agree with Melissa on it, that I think the saving grace was Nanet's acting. And especially like you saw the diversity of her acting in the second half there when she had to do both the intendant and Major Kira there. That I think that's what made, at least for me, this show better than, for example, the one we always make fun of, Meridian. For me, this was a little bit better than that because of that. So
right.
That was my upshot to it, or my up part to it.
What did you guys think of say Bareilles' acting? Were you happy to see him back? Did you think it was all Kira, or what did you think?
I was not happy to see him back.
Really?
But I think he did a good job. And I want to echo what Mohamed said. I thought Nana's the difference between the two characters. She's so soft. Her PTSD has decreased. You see such a soft, loving, kind person. And then the opposite of that intendant, that character I absolutely hate. I'm not a fan of the alternate universe thing. I'm maybe the only one here who's not a fan of them, but I thought she did a great job of showing the difference between the two characters.
Especially
but the Vedic Bareil, no, he's just.
I thought it was Shakar at first.
He makes it look up pretty easily. Yeah,
I got lost.
Yeah, no, he's not attractive at all, and that's
not
one
even
reason
with his
why I
shirt
didn't
off?
like this episode, because he's just seems like such a dirtbag, which is great acting on the part of the.
There you go.
You mean you're not attracted to him when he shows up on the transporter pad with his eyes crossed?
His hair in his face.
I also noticed that. Yes. Okay, but speaking of Shakar, we didn't mention our non-appearance mentions today. The Nams. Shakar was one. Did you guys catch the other two?
Does Captain Baudet count? Because we've never seen him.
Never seen a Galamite in general, have we?
It feels like we have.
We'll never see him. I don't think we've seen any. Galamite, right, Scott? We don't see any ever.
Now, Lower Decks needs to be listening, because they could totally do that great.
You're right. Yeah.
Oh, they could pull it off on there.
That'd be awesome. I've looked it up before to even see. There's artist depictions, but they're not very good. They can make them more creepy than believable.
Well, what I had was Jennifer Sisko was mentioned again.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it's okay to give a NAM to Vedic Bareil, because he was mentioned several times. Just because the same actor plays it doesn't mean it's the same character, right? And we got a ton of his character growth. You know, they said that he never drank. They talked about what he did and what he didn't do and who he was. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Oh, well, if that's the case, then I think we've got Jennifer Sisko times two.
For sure. Mirror Jennifer and Prime Jennifer.
Yeah.
He said how she didn't match up, wasn't the same person. And then Kira just made the mistake anyway.
I agree.
Yeah, but
I think they all count.
have to make our own mistakes to learn the lesson. So
absolutely.
Whoa.
Kind of almost a whirlwind rebound bit, because she's dealing with this sort of avoidance with Odo.
Bit. I got scared there.
No. No, I'm better than that on camera, I hope. But But she's dealing with the avoidance of Odo and everything else that she's dealt with, and everything with Brile was super tough. It could just be one of those things that she allowed herself to give in. I don't know. I can think that, I can surmise, I can think a lot deeper into this episode that I think it had going for it, but it still seems so out of character, just in general. And I just don't like this Brile, other than feeling sorry for him. I mean, just if his backstory is true. Did he have the love beforehand that he stole her little money purse, etc., so forth, or is this just to gain Kira's sympathy and or empathy? So much they could have done with this. I would have loved to have seen his orb experience, the possibilities he could have had with our universe Kira, as opposed to Intendant Kira. I love the outfit, but I can't stand Intendant Kira. I mean, you're not supposed to. I'm not big on the whole mirror universe
Cirroc
thing.
will fight you to the death on that, right?
I mean,
I said, Cirroc, you like that? Really?
Yeah.
Put that thing on her head? You like that? I want to toss that sucker out an airlock.
Okay, Cirroc. The second you heard Intendant Kira's voice and her pop in, did you go, okay, this episode is turning up a bit for me?
Yeah, I was getting interested, except I don't know, Brile's he doesn't do it for me as far as the performance and stuff. So, but no, the crown is the last thing I'd take off on Intendant Kira if I was taking something else.
That's right.
Would you take it off and put it on your head?
No, you can keep that on.
At least he's honest.
I had a problem with this episode, the pace of it. I called it slow budget because I thought it was a slow budget. But no, I would have liked had they made this an episode that was a get back at Odo for sleeping with the founder.
Right.
And so if Odo was more involved in this episode, maybe like, investigating,
having a
B plot. And so he was around, snooping around, trying to see what was going on, and maybe telling Kira, you shouldn't like this guy because I don't trust him, because he's wrong for you. And it would have been exactly the same, that it kind of get back at Odo for doing what he did. So I thought they could have played that element of the story. It would have worked for me a lot better. And maybe Odo pops up and he disguised himself as an orb, and he's really, transformed himself just so he can get in the mix. So I would have liked that twist better than what they gave us. But I definitely feel like it was a get back moment for Odo, which they didn't play up enough. Like, Odo, this is what you get. You get to cheat on your end. I'm going to do a little cheating on my end and see how much you like it.
I actually did think about that real quick. How kind of halfway that, but also that, like, I think a lot of people might have bristled at the thought of Major Kira just falling for somebody that quickly. And then I kind of caught myself where I'm like, well, why can't she? I mean, if O'Brien does it, well, wait, no, that's a bad idea. Not O'Brien. If Bashir does it, we're like, okay, cool, Bashir, great job. Melora, good God, the lady that did the thing in the floating space thing. But why can't Kira just take a load off and be like, hey, whatever, I know you're not the guy, but you remind me of him. So I've had a tough, 4 months, and so, I think a lot of it is just us kind of bristling at that thought. Maybe we place Kira on too high of a pedestal, where she's still not human, but for as much as we know, she's still just a normal person. But I don't know. That was just kind of my thinking there.
I have a question for you guys. Did you notice the interaction when Bashir is in ops and he's kind of waiting to, like,
Oh yeah,
has this weird.
Oh yeah,
it's like he takes a weird interest in what Kira was doing, and I didn't see the.
Could have been Odo.
I see that in a real life situation because I think at that point they were real life a couple. So it was kind of interesting when he was like, unless you have any more details about what happened. And she says, goodbye, doctor.
Yeah.
And they share that moment of that awkward moment kind of look. But I thought it was strange that Bashir was so interested in knowing what the details of her little sexcapade. I thought that was kind of awkward to me because I never saw them paired up or him kind of making moves on her.
Well, I mean, in the third season, they did establish that there was a latent attraction between them when Lwaxana had that older Betazoid disease, but But at the same time, because it's so out of character for Kira just to, fall for somebody so quickly, why wouldn't he be curious about the gossip that's going on the station? It is a small town. And to piggyback off of what Ryan was saying, I agree that, when she said, that I'm looking to be alone right now, I don't think that she was being honest with herself. I think she's lonely and she's not satisfied with the choices that she has at the moment because she hasn't dealt with her feelings for Odo yet. And she is still mourning the loss of her the loves in her life. And then this guy comes along and looks exactly like, the guy that one of the loves of her life. So I don't think it's so crazy to think that she would immediately fall in love with him because of the possibilities or romanticizing, the idea of them being together. So
totally.
Yeah.
Eve England, your thoughts? By the way, Eve England today is wearing a gorgeous sweater made by Abyssinian Kiosk. It's Abyssinian Kiosk version of the pretty sweater, not the ugly sweater. Oh, and mug. Everybody, you can find that
jumper.
Jumper, is that what it is?
That's like
jumper.
A jumper.
You can find that link in the description box below. Check it out. Get cool Christmas and holiday things and Star Trek stuff, and just all around Eastern African goodies. Anyway, please continue, Eve.
Yeah, I think I agree with everyone's assessment. It just seemed to me, I just wrote, it just felt a bit flat, felt a bit disjointed. And like, there are certain aspects of it that I liked. I like the idea of the intendant coming over and trying to sort of infiltrate the station. I thought that was a really nice idea compared to what we've seen before with the mirror universe. I particularly love the mirror universe, but it just, I think it just didn't quite fit together. And I thought the same thing with the Bashir moment. I just felt that the way he played that, I think it would have worked much better had he been in much more of a sort of, because everybody else, their tone when they were talking was quite gossipy and quite sort of school-like in the way that they were talking about it. But then Bashir came in and was almost so serious. And I felt that kind of just, the tone wasn't quite right in the way that then played out, which just made it feel a bit weird. So I think, I just felt the whole thing just felt a bit flat. And I think it could have been a much better episode, but I think it did need something else to sort of dovetail with that story. So I agree that not having a B plot to this was to its detriment. I didn't object to the story per se. I agree that Kira actually, I didn't feel that was out of character or was unbelievable. The one thing that the companion said, though, which I think is quite interesting and might have given a bit more context, is they did film an additional scene at the start where Kira and Dax were looking at some of Zial's artwork and they were talking about how they miss people. And I think Jadzia made a joke about her bringing, death to the house for their dinner party, etc. So I think it might have sort of set the scene a bit more in terms of where Kira maybe was emotionally, had that sort of introduction been made, because we started off with that really jovial conversation about Captain Bode and etc. And but that's really not what the episode was then about, and it was quite a sort of serious episode. So yeah, it's not one of my favorites either, but had some good bits. So I don't think it was as bad as Meridian. Definitely not.
Do you think that? Sorry, I was just going to say at the beginning there, if it was Odo instead of Bashir, kind of poking around and using kind of Cirroc's idea of that as a B plot, maybe that would have given us something more to chew on. But what were you saying, Mohamed? Sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, if there was no twist halfway in, if it was just Bareil trying to acclimate to being here, it would have been Meridian. It would have been terrible.
Yeah, it would have been
nice that there was that like twist in there too. I was very scared watching, like, twist. Oh my God, please let there be a twist.
Should have had her get pregnant.
Oh my God, that would have been a serious twist. Holy
It's a lot for an episode.
It's a whole lot.
Goldu Scott, speaking of a whole lot, you've got a whole lot to say about this episode.
Do I? My favorite thing about the episode was being able to bust out my Vedic Brawl action figure.
Hey,
there he is. He's blessing you. Haldar Joy. Haldar Joy, everybody.
Did you notice that one Vedic did say my child, though, by the way?
Mm-hmm.
See, is it just slang for Vedics? Yeah, I would definitely, it's the slang for, I would definitely echo what everybody's saying. It was very cool to see everybody playing, and he played such a different person than Vedic Baral. Mm-hmm. And I know we did also have, how many years has Baral been dead at this point? Was that season 1 or season 1 he died in, wasn't it?
Season 3.
It was early on.
I think it
season 3.
3? Okay, yeah, I think it's been a long time since he passed too. And yeah, I think the most exciting part of the episode though was when he turned around on the transporter pad, and after that it was kind of just maintaining. That, so.
Surprise.
That would have been cool. Imagine a B plot where maybe Quark got some kind of info on him, and then he shares it with Odo, and Odo's like, well, if we really think this guy's dirty, nobody's going to believe me because, they know how you feel. And then Quark and Odo could have had another beautiful exchange of them just barking at each other the entire episode where Quark is forcing him to. So, I don't want to get into spoilers about what's coming up with Odo and his admitting feelings and stuff like that, but it could have been another cool little thing where Quark is just needling him just enough. Maybe you should tell the Major how you really feel. Maybe you should back and forth. And I have this evidence he's stealing something. And then, I felt like it was really quick with the Intendant just popping up like that. And I don't know, she was in real trouble the last time we saw her. Wasn't she in a cell in the other reality the last time we saw her? Like she got deposed.
I don't recall.
She's
always in real trouble.
She's always in real trouble. So I didn't know why she just brings some stormtroopers with her. Like we're going to the other reality, which is a bunch of stormtroopers and just wreck everything. And
I don't understand.
That's what I feel like the Intendant would have done more.
Why Kira just didn't tell anybody that the Attendant was there. Just immediately do something about it. She had a disruptor with her. Why didn't she just shoot her in the face? This is the Intendant. We know the problems. We know what she's done. Just be done with it. It's just there are so many things they could have done, and you've had the perfect word for it. It is flat. It's
Tierney,
just flat.
Was it a little something like this?
Yeah.
Because I noticed that right away too.
Every time he does that, every time I've seen that, he looks like a cat that has that slight cross eye. Yeah. You know what I mean? Cats that just have that.
Pounce.
Yes. Yeah, he looks like one of my old Siamese when I was a little girl. He just turns around. He's there. There he is, peekaboo, my Siamese, just staring. I'm gonna shoot you. It's just terrible. But I thought of something today that I don't know why it never occurred to me before. He's supposed to be close to the Intendant. I don't know if he'd have ever seen him, but he goes and has dinner with Dax and Worf, who Worf in Mirror Universe just happens to be the Regent. Who's captured the Intendant at one point and is big in another faction of etc. evil in the Mirror Universe. they could have done something with that of, holy crap, this is the regent and I'm just here having strange jello dessert with you and
stealing his knives.
Yeah, just here's your cut your jello souffle. And
Gotcha.
They could have done something with that. They also could have just straight up captured Bareil instantly in this ridiculous trek up to an upper pylon, which isn't a landing pad, by the way, Sisko, Odo. And that could have just been a ruse. But they go all the way up there, I would think, just to give Odo's security team time. I would think that would also give him plenty enough time to slither through something and catch him off guard, anything. And then just the resemblance to Vedi Bareil is remarkable. It's not resemblance. He's the same damn guy. Like,
that's true.
You're a shapeshifter. Like you should be able to determine certain physical parameters a little bit better, at least visually, with your not eyeballs. But just it was flat.
Hey, Homer, you and Tierney just reminded me with what you said, Tierney, about, I forgot. I didn't get a chance to do this because we were too busy telling stories. It's time for the nitpick number 47. That dirty ass Mek'leth is going to destroy your flawn. Gross.
Gross anyway.
Clean properly.
Where was he holding his Mek'leth, and where did he? And then he just like, why didn't like Dax go like, ew, dude, we're gonna eat that.
You're gonna run it through decon like they did on Enterprise, and just put all that goo on it, rub it down, make it clean.
Mint frosting.
It did, yeah.
I did like Kira's line about I needed the exercise about going up the pylons. Like, why did you go? I needed the exercise.
Yeah, that was kind of
going that day.
That was weird too, because she allowed herself to get kidnapped on the bridge. She's like, "Yeah, I already noticed the demons."
Like it was a trap.
Yeah, she was never in any danger. That was the thing.
She knew it was a trap. She knew that the cell thing was cracked, so she knew he wasn't going to shoot her. So, and she knew Odo was waiting on the other end because Sisko kind of hinted at it in a way when he gave Odo the order to meet, where they were going. So she knew she wasn't in any danger. She was
that was a role play. She told him that she wanted to get kidnapped once, and she's going along with it.
That too.
I think that was a secret fantasy of hers, because the way he walked her out, he was like, "Let me back out of here." She's like, "I gotta leave, guys. Gotta leave."
She's like, "All right."
Yeah,
Then we'll walk.
I like the moment Dax had with Kira in the beginning of this episode, the kind of like the relationship that they had. She was kind of going through the Captain Baudet and all the third eye guy and all that stuff. I kind of like that little conversation. It felt like two girlfriends talking, in the hallway. So I like that. Also did like the way that the intendant looked at herself in the mirror when she said, yeah, well, she is the next best thing to me, and the way she looked at herself, it was like she was so in love with herself. And I'm like, oh, I had to look it back. I have to rewind and say, look how Nana looks at herself in the mirror in this scene. Like she loves herself. And then finally is Worf's line, and that is all it is, a story.
Yes.
When he does that.
I got so mad. He was sitting there.
I like that moment. Yeah.
False.
Yeah, he was
great moments.
Those were
I do
good
have
moments.
a
Those
question
were
about that line.
Yeah.
How does Worf know what Klingons are like in the alternate universe? Because it's alternate, and he hasn't been there. So
Worf is a
he's
fusser.
Assuming that
He's
all
just a
Klingon
fusser.
warriors are the same.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's ever been wrong about anything in his own mind. Yeah.
Because he's Worf.
Yeah.
I actually was worried. I thought a big point for me was why the Bajorans in the alternate universe didn't believe in the prophets and da 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 da. Like, how do they have a whole different religion And I would like them to expand on that a little bit more, because he was like, I don't believe in anything, you know. I chose not to believe in nothing or something like that.
Aren't
so I was
the
like,
Bajorans like not the oppressed, but the oppressor more so? And so maybe that has something to do with it. Whereas before, when they were oppressed, you know, the faith was all they had. Whereas if they are the oppressor, they kind of just toss that out the window and we're like, faith is for suckers. We're the champs or whatever. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Maybe they go for the power eights over there.
Sounds really.
I thought it was a cultural thing. Yeah.
How was it?
Well, yeah, I mean, and the Terrans are different in the alternate universe too, and they have different beliefs and ways of thinking of things. And maybe the prophets are different in the alternate universe too. So
good point.
That relationship has never been established there. So why would they believe in the prophets?
Well, then why did they want the orb?
I never saw
Why
any
would they
orbs
want
over there,
the
did they?
orb? Why was the orb so important?
Orbs.
Right.
Well, because they've been doing research on the Prime universe, which is why they're here to steal the orb in the first place. They're trying to bring religion to Bajor, which doesn't have it at the moment.
Yeah, they want to control them. They see it as a way of controlling them.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
Did ordinarily they tell us it's the orb of something something? I don't think we figured out or we learned what this orb was.
Yeah, they did. They said this was the Ors of prophecy and change.
Ah, thank you. You paid more attention to this episode than I did.
That's a compliment.
That's saying something.
Well, that's the look right there that she gave herself right there behind you.
Yeah.
What's it? She's like, what's up?
And as you guys were mentioning, when like the total stark difference that Nana plays the two characters, to where when Mirror Universe Kira walks up to that poor guard that didn't know what hit him, you immediately know which Kira it is from the way she saunters in with her long strides and her flow. And you immediately go, wow, that's a very noticeable difference in the walk. It must be Mirror Universe Kira.
Good point.
Just that scene where when she had Kira's uniform on, it was so unnerving because we'd never seen the intendant in anything close to that Bajoran orange, and we'd never seen anything that's comfortable. Those tones are comfortable. This Bajor is comfortable. It's got the earth tones and the yellows and the oranges, and then the intendant is like leather and metal and all like 80s punk rock stuff. And to have her in that uniform and then talking and to just be flipping back and forth and just that one scene right there was absolutely great too. And I get shocked by how amazing
scene too. Like the transition.
And she's got that uniform on.
Yeah.
I'm jealous of that security officer giving that massage. I don't know about you.
He's like, you got a lot to learn about giving a massage, buddy.
Like 4 seconds before you're sleeping on the ground.
Yeah, he thought
he got excited.
In class.
You can see it. He was like, oh, okay. I like this. This is good.
It's feeling a little awkward, but he's getting into it.
But clearly, both the intendant and Kira have trained under the double-handed
the Kirk
double fist punch.
Double fist punch. Yes. So she busted it out when it was necessary.
You got to learn that in Star Trek. Scott, you're wearing a laser beak shirt. Isn't that like a Transformers character?
It is a DJ, but he's named that. There's a Z in it where the Transformer was an S. So
was he named after
awesome DJ?
Okay, well,
yeah, probably. They're all pretty nerdy, so I wouldn't put it too far past them.
It was like that cassette
I noticed
tape.
the picture.
You noticed something behind the wall there, Melissa?
Yeah.
You notice that? You're
very familiar.
Very familiar. And you're hanging out next to the Fifth Doctor too.
Yeah. That's
wonderful,
pretty
man.
awesome.
Oh, is that
the camera was far away?
Is that a Melissa creation?
Yeah, I don't know how much closer I can get with it.
Well, that's okay. We're gonna spotlight you here. Let me.
You're hanging out with Vedic Baral and Cthulhu and the Fifth Doctor.
That's Felicity from the Dancing Goddess suit.
It was my absolute favorite out of all of them. I'm gonna have a whole set eventually.
Wow.
Oh, awesome.
Standing.
everybody that's just listening is like, what is it? Well, I guess you're just going to have to go on YouTube.
You got to see it.
You're just going to have to find out.
Or go to walkingartmadebybelisa.com.
That's the
really
best
easy
way to do it. You can find that link in the description box below. Everybody at home. I think that's about it for us today. This has been a fun one. This has been quite the lively debate and good stuff. Homer's doing the Arsenio Hall. Thank goodness for that. So thank you, Sue, Tierney, Mohamed, Eve, Melissa, Homer, and Galdu Scott for Cirroc, and the coolest dude ever in the history of the world, Aaron Eisenberg, and Galdu Scott's Vedic Barile action figure. There he is. He's saying, my child. All right. Always remember the 7th rule.